The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Millfield, Texas, as Sarah Martinez walked to school with her younger brother Danny. At 17, she had already developed the quiet confidence that comes from being responsible for others. Her father worked double shifts at the oil refinery, and her mother cleaned houses across town to make ends meet. Sarah had learned early that life didn't hand out favors, especially not to families like hers. "You think Dad will make it to the game tonight?" Danny asked, kicking a stone down the sidewalk. He was trying out for the junior varsity football team, and tonight was his first real chance to prove himself. Sarah glanced at her brother's hopeful face and felt the familiar weight of being the one who had to manage expectations. "Maybe," she said, though they both knew their father would likely be too exhausted after his shift. "But I'll be there, and I'll cheer loud enough for both of us." The high school appeared ahead of them, a sprawling brick building that had seen better decades. Sarah had always been a good student, not brilliant, but consistent. She kept her head down, did her work, and avoided the drama that seemed to follow her classmates. Her teachers liked her because she never caused trouble, though few of them really knew her beyond the quiet girl who turned in assignments on time. In first-period history, Mrs. Chen was discussing World War II when she mentioned something that caught Sarah's attention. "The Women's Army Corps played crucial roles during the war," she said, clicking through slides of black and white photographs. "Many served as support staff, but some broke barriers in unexpected ways." Sarah found herself studying the faces of the women in uniform. They looked determined, purposeful. She had never really thought about military service before, but something about their expressions resonated with her. These weren't women waiting for life to happen to them. At lunch, she sat with her usual group of friends from the Honor Society. Maria was complaining about her college applications, while Jessica stressed over her SAT scores. The conversation felt distant to Sarah. College seemed like a luxury she couldn't afford, and her friends' worries about which university to choose felt foreign to her reality. "What about you, Sarah?" Maria asked suddenly. "Have you decided where you're applying?" Sarah shrugged, picking at her sandwich. "Still figuring it out," she said, which was her standard response. The truth was more complicated. She had good grades, but not scholarships. To elite schools, good. Her family needed her to start earning money, not accumulate debt. The military had started appearing in her thoughts more frequently, though she hadn't mentioned it to anyone. After school, she stopped by the public library to do homework. The librarian, Mrs. Rodriguez, had always been kind to Sarah, sometimes letting her stay past closing time when she needed a quiet place to study. Today, Mrs. Rodriguez was organizing returned books when Sarah approached the reference desk. "I was wondering," Sarah began hesitantly, "do you have any information about women in the military?" Mrs. Rodriguez's eyebrows rose slightly, but her expression remained warm. "Of course. Are you working on a research project?" "Something like that," Sarah replied, which wasn't entirely untrue. Mrs. Rodriguez led her to a section Sarah had never explored before. She pulled several books from the shelf, along with some recent magazines about military careers. "There's been a lot of change in recent years," she said. "Women are serving in roles that were unthinkable when I was your age." That evening, Sarah spread the materials across her desk at home. She read about women pilots, engineers, and combat medics. She learned about the ongoing debates over women in combat roles and the slow but steady progress being made. One article particularly caught her attention. It discussed marksmanship training and how some of the military's best shooters were defying traditional expectations. Sarah had never fired a gun in her life. Growing up in Texas, this was somewhat unusual, but her family had never been hunters or sport shooters. Her father worked with his hands but preferred tools to weapons. The idea of precision shooting intrigued her, though. It seemed to require the same kind of focus and discipline she applied to her studies. The next few days passed in a blur of classes and research. Sarah found herself paying closer attention to the military recruitment posters she passed in the hallways, though she still hadn't spoken to anyone about her growing interest. She was naturally cautious about major decisions, preferring to thoroughly understand something before committing. On Friday afternoon, she noticed a table set up in the school commons area. The Army recruiter, Sergeant First Class Williams, was talking to students during lunch. Sarah watched from a distance as he spoke enthusiastically to a group of senior boys about opportunities and benefits. She noticed that very few girls approached the table. After most students had cleared out, Sarah found herself walking over. Sergeant Williams looked up with a practiced smile. "Good afternoon, miss. I'm Sergeant Williams. Are you interested in learning about Army opportunities?" Sarah nodded, suddenly feeling nervous. "I've been doing some reading about women in the military," she said. "That's great," Williams replied, his tone becoming more serious and respectful. "There are more opportunities for women now than ever before. What areas interest you most?" Sarah hesitated. "I've been reading about marksmanship training. Is that something women really do?" Williams' expression shifted to one of genuine enthusiasm. "Absolutely. Some of our best marksmen are women. The military values precision and discipline over physical strength in shooting sports. Would you like to know more about our training programs?" For the next 20 minutes, Sarah listened as Williams explained various military occupational specialties, education benefits, and training opportunities. He gave her brochures and his card, encouraging her to think it over and speak with her parents. That weekend, Sarah finally broached the subject at home. Her family was gathered around the kitchen table for their traditional Saturday night dinner. Nothing fancy, but a time when they all tried to be together despite their busy schedules. "I've been thinking about what I want to do after graduation," Sarah began carefully. Her mother, Elena, looked up from her plate. "College, right? You've worked so hard for your grades." "Maybe," Sarah said, "but I've also been looking into other options. Military service specifically." The silence that followed felt heavy. Her father, Roberto, set down his fork and studied his daughter's face. "The military?" he said finally. "Mija, that's a big decision." "I know," Sarah replied, "but they have excellent training programs, education benefits, and I think I might be good at it." Danny, now 14 and full of teenage opinions, jumped in. "That's actually pretty cool, Sarah. Like, way cooler than sitting in classrooms for 4 more years. Elena looked worried. "But it's dangerous, isn't it? And you're so smart. You could be a teacher or a nurse or anything you want." Sarah had anticipated these concerns. "Mom, women serve in all kinds of roles now, and the training I could get might open doors I can't even see yet. Plus, they help pay for college afterward." Roberto had been quiet during this exchange, but now he spoke up. "Tell us what you've learned," he said simply. For the next hour, Sarah shared everything she had researched. She talked about career paths, educational opportunities, and the changing role of women in the military. She mentioned her interest in marksmanship training, explaining how it combined precision, discipline, and mental focus. "You've done your homework," Roberto said finally. "But this isn't something you rush into. If you're serious about this, you need to visit the recruiter again. Maybe visit a base. Talk to women who are actually serving." Elena still looked concerned, but she nodded. "Your father's right. If this is what you really want to explore, we should make sure you understand what you're getting into." Over the following weeks, Sarah did exactly that. She returned to speak with Sergeant Williams several times, asking detailed questions about training, deployment, and daily life in the military. He arranged for her to speak with female soldiers via video call, including a staff sergeant who had recently completed advanced marksmanship training. "The thing about shooting," Staff Sergeant Lisa Park explained during their conversation, "is that it's not about being tough or aggressive. It's about control, controlling your breathing, your heartbeat, your focus. It's almost meditative." Sarah found this description appealing. She had always been someone who thrived on structure and clear objectives. The idea of mastering a skill that required such precise mental discipline excited her in a way that sitting in lecture halls did not. She also learned about the reality of military life, the early mornings, the physical demands, the possibility of deployment. Williams was honest about the challenges, which Sarah appreciated. She didn't want to make this decision based on unrealistic expectations. One evening in November, as Sarah was reviewing her research and trying to organize her thoughts, her phone rang. It was Maria, calling about weekend plans. "We're all going to the movies tomorrow," Maria said. "You should come. You've been so serious lately." Sarah looked at the brochures spread across her desk, then at her reflection in her bedroom window. "I might have other plans," she said. "Come on, Sarah. You're acting weird? Ever since you started talking to that army guy, you're like a different person." Sarah considered this. Maybe she was becoming a different person, or maybe she was just discovering who she had always been underneath the careful, cautious exterior she had maintained for so long. "I'll think about it," she told Maria. But she already knew she would spend Saturday visiting the local army base that Sergeant Williams had arranged for her to tour. The base visit proved to be a turning point. Sarah spent 4 hours touring facilities, observing training exercises, and talking with personnel. What struck her most was the sense of purpose she observed in the soldiers she met. They seemed to know exactly why they were there and what they were working toward. At the shooting range, she watched a group of soldiers practice marksmanship under the supervision of their instructor. The concentration was absolute. No talking, no distractions, just careful aim and controlled breathing. When one young woman consistently hit targets at impressive distances, Sarah felt something click into place. That could be me, she thought, and for the first time, the idea felt not just possible, but inevitable. On the drive home, Sarah made her decision. She would finish high school, of course, but after graduation, she would enlist. She would train as hard as necessary, learn everything they could teach her, and prove that she belonged. That night, she called Sergeant Williams to schedule another meeting. This time, she wasn't just gathering information. This time, she was ready to commit to a path that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself and what she was capable of achieving. As she fell asleep, Sarah imagined herself in uniform, standing on a shooting range, completely focused on a target hundreds of yards away. In her imagination, she never missed. The thought filled her with a sense of purpose she had never experienced before, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly excited about her future. The girl who had always been responsible, careful, and practical was about to discover that she was also brave, determined, and destined for something extraordinary. The journey would not be easy, but Sarah Martinez was ready to begin. The bus pulled into Fort Benning, Georgia at 4:30 in the morning, and Sarah Martinez stepped into her new life with a mixture of excitement and terror. Around her, dozens of other young recruits shuffled sleepily toward the reception building, their civilian clothes marking them as outsiders in this military world they were about to enter. Sarah had spent her last weeks at home preparing as best she could. She had started running every morning, done push-ups until her arms ached, and read every military handbook she could find. But nothing had truly prepared her for the reality of leaving everything familiar behind and starting over in a place where she knew absolutely no one. "Welcome to Fort Benning." The voice that shattered the early morning quiet belonged to a drill sergeant whose presence commanded immediate attention. "You have approximately 30 seconds to grab your gear and form a line. Move." The next several hours passed in a blur of paperwork, medical examinations, and uniform distribution. Sarah found herself assigned to Alpha Company, 2nd Battalion, along with 43 other female recruits. As she carried her duffel bag toward the barracks, that would be her home for the next 14 weeks, she caught sight of her reflection in a window. Already, in her new uniform, she looked different, more serious, more purposeful. Her bunk was assigned next to Jennifer Walsh, a tall blonde girl from Minnesota who had played college basketball before deciding to enlist. On her other side was Maria Santos, a petite girl from New Mexico whose quiet demeanor reminded Sarah of herself. "So, what made you join up?" Jennifer asked as they unpacked their basic equipment that first evening. The question would become familiar over the coming days. Everyone had a story about why they had chosen this path. "I want to learn marksmanship," Sarah replied simply. "I want to be the best shooter I can be." Jennifer raised an eyebrow. "Have you ever fired a gun before?" "No," Sarah admitted, "but I've read a lot about it." Maria looked up from organizing her gear. "My dad's a hunter. He taught me to shoot when I was 12. It's not as easy as it looks." Sarah felt a flicker of doubt, but pushed it aside. She hadn't come this far to be discouraged by her lack of experience. "I guess I'll find out soon enough." The first weeks of basic training were a shock to every system in Sarah's body. The 4:30 a.m. wake-up calls, the constant physical demands, the endless drills and inspections, everything was designed to break down civilian habits and rebuild military ones. Sarah found herself challenged in ways she had never imagined. Physical training was particularly difficult. While she had prepared by running and doing basic exercises, the intensity and duration of military PT pushed her beyond anything she had experienced. During the first week, she could barely complete the required push-ups and struggled through the obstacle courses that came naturally to some of her fellow recruits. Martinez, Drill Sergeant Patricia Reynolds, called out during a particularly brutal morning of PT. "You're holding up your team. Pick up the pace." Sarah gritted her teeth and forced her exhausted legs to move faster through the rope climbing exercise. She refused to be the weak link, even when her muscles screamed in protest. Around her, some recruits were already showing signs of wanting to quit. Sarah was determined not to be among them. The academic portions of training came more easily to her. Classroom sessions on military history, protocol, and procedures played to her strengths as a student. She absorbed information quickly and scored well on written examinations, but she knew that academic success alone wouldn't be enough if she couldn't meet the physical demands of military service. 3 weeks into training, Sarah experienced her first major breakthrough. During a particularly challenging day of combat training exercises, she found herself crawling through mud under simulated enemy fire. The recruit next to her, a girl named Angela from California, was struggling to keep up and beginning to panic. "I can't do this," Angela whispered, tears mixing with the dirt on her face. "I want to go home." Without thinking, Sarah rolled closer to her teammate. "Yes, you can," she said firmly. "Look at me. We're going to do this together. Focus on my voice and follow me." For the next 20 minutes, Sarah guided Angela through the exercise, offering encouragement and practical advice while completing her own requirements. When they finally reached the end of the course, both girls were exhausted but victorious. It was the first time Sarah had taken a leadership role among her peers, and something about it felt natural and right. Drill Sergeant Reynolds had observed the entire exchange. That evening, she pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation. "Good work today, Martinez," she said. "You showed leadership potential out there." Sarah felt a surge of pride, but Reynolds wasn't finished. "However, leadership means nothing if you can't back it up with performance. Your PT scores are improving, but they need to improve faster. I'm recommending you for additional training time with the fitness instructors." Sarah's heart sank slightly. Additional training meant less sleep and more pressure, but she knew Reynolds was right. "Thank you, Drill Sergeant. I'll work harder." "I know you will," Reynolds replied, "because I can see something in you, Martinez. You've got heart and you've got brains. Now you need to develop the physical skills to match." The extra fitness training proved to be exactly what Sarah needed. Working with Sergeant Mike Torres, a former competitive athlete, she learned proper form and technique that made her workouts more effective. More importantly, she learned to push through mental barriers that had been limiting her performance. "Physical fitness is 90% mental," Torres explained during one of their sessions. "Your body is capable of more than your mind wants to believe. The trick is learning to ignore the voice that tells you to quit." Sarah applied this philosophy to every aspect of her training. When her legs wanted to give out during long runs, she focused on her breathing and her goal of becoming a marksman. When her arms trembled during extended push-up sessions, she reminded herself of the women in uniform she had researched, who had overcome similar challenges to serve their country. The breakthrough in her physical performance coincided with another significant milestone: her first introduction to actual firearms training. After weeks of learning military basics, Alpha Company was finally scheduled to begin marksmanship instruction. Sarah had been both anticipating and dreading this moment. Everything she had told people about wanting to become a skilled marksman would be put to the test. Either she had the natural ability she hoped for, or she would need to work harder than anyone else to develop it. The morning of their first range day dawned clear and cold. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she handled her assigned M16 rifle for the first time. The weapon was heavier than she had expected, but it felt solid and purposeful in her hands. Instructor Staff Sergeant David Kim walked the recruits through basic safety procedures and weapon familiarization. Sarah absorbed every word, taking mental notes about proper grip stance and sight alignment. This was what she had come here for. "Marksmanship is not about strength or aggression," Kim explained to the group assembled on the indoor range. "It's about control, consistency, and mental focus. Some of you will have natural ability. Others will need to work for every improvement. But everyone can become proficient with proper training and practice." When it came time for their first actual shooting session, Sarah positioned herself carefully according to Kim's instructions. She controlled her breathing, aligned the sights as demonstrated, and gently squeezed the trigger. Her first shot missed the target entirely. So did her second. Her third shot clipped the edge of the paper target, but nowhere near the bullseye. Around her, other recruits were having varying degrees of success. Maria, with her hunting background, was grouping shots near the center. Jennifer was struggling as much as Sarah. A few recruits seemed to have natural ability that allowed them to hit consistently from their first attempts. Sarah felt a familiar determination rising within her. This was exactly like the physical training. She would start behind, but she would not stay behind. During the lunch break, she approached Staff Sergeant Kim privately. "Sergeant, I know I'm not doing well, but I really want to learn. Is there anything I can do for extra practice?" Kim studied her for a moment. "What's your motivation for wanting to improve?" Sarah considered her answer carefully. "I believe this is something I'm meant to do. I know that probably sounds stupid since I can barely hit the target, but I feel like if I can master this skill, I can contribute something important to the military." Kim's expression softened slightly. "It doesn't sound stupid at all, Martinez. Natural talent is nice to have, but determination and willingness to work usually win in the long run. Report to the range at 1800 hours tonight. We'll work on fundamentals." That evening marked the beginning of Sarah's real education in marksmanship. Working one-on-one with Kim, she learned to identify and correct the small errors that were affecting her accuracy. Her grip was too tight, causing the weapon to shift when she pulled the trigger. Her breathing pattern was inconsistent, making it impossible to time her shots properly. Most importantly, Kim taught her about the mental game of shooting. "Stop thinking about the target," he instructed during one of their sessions. "Think about your process. Proper stance, proper grip, proper sight picture, proper trigger pull. If you execute the process correctly, the bullet will go where it's supposed to go." Sarah embraced this systematic approach completely. She practiced the fundamentals until they became automatic. She spent hours in dry-fire training, perfecting her trigger pull without ammunition. She studied ballistics and weather effects in her free time. Her scores began to improve slowly, but steadily. By the halfway point of basic training, she was consistently hitting the target, though not yet with the precision she wanted to achieve. More importantly, she was developing the mental discipline that would serve her throughout her military career. The improvement wasn't just limited to marksmanship. Her additional physical training and growing confidence had made her stronger and faster. Her PT scores had risen to well above the minimum requirements. She was becoming a soldier. One evening, as she cleaned her rifle after a particularly good day at the range, Maria sat down beside her. "You know, when you first said you'd never fired a gun before, I thought you were crazy for thinking you could become a marksman," Maria said. "But watching you work these past weeks has been pretty inspiring. You never give up." Sarah looked up from her weapon maintenance. "I can't give up. This is what I came here to do." "What happens after basic training?" Maria asked. "Where do you want to get assigned?" Sarah had been thinking about this question a lot lately. "I want advanced marksmanship training. I want to get good enough to compete. Maybe even set some records." Maria laughed, but not mockingly. "You know what? After seeing how hard you work, I actually believe you might do it." As basic training entered its final weeks, Sarah had transformed from the uncertain girl who had arrived at Fort Benning into a confident soldier. She still wasn't the best shot in her company. That honor belonged to Maria, but she was no longer the worst either. More importantly, she had discovered something about herself that would define her military career. She had an extraordinary capacity for improvement when she truly committed herself to something. Every day, she could execute the fundamentals a little bit better than the day before. Every week, her scores improved measurably. She wasn't just learning to shoot, she was learning to excel through systematic effort and unwavering dedication. The night before graduation from basic training, Sarah lay in her bunk thinking about how much she had changed in 14 weeks. The scared teenager who had stepped off the bus was gone, replaced by someone who understood what she was capable of achieving. Tomorrow, she would graduate and receive her first assignment. She had requested advanced individual training in a military occupational specialty that would allow her to pursue marksmanship training. Whether she would receive that assignment remained to be seen, But she was no longer worried about her ability to succeed wherever the military sent her. She had proven to herself that she could master skills she had never attempted before. She had developed physical and mental toughness she hadn't known she possessed. Most importantly, she had discovered that her desire to excel was matched by her willingness to put in whatever work was necessary. As she drifted off to sleep for the last time in the basic training barracks, Sarah smiled. The girl who had once worried about whether she could become a marksman was now planning to break records. The transformation was remarkable, but looking back, it also felt inevitable. She had found her calling, and her calling had found her. The Advanced Individual Training Facility at Fort Gordon, Georgia, represented everything Sarah Martinez had dreamed about during those long nights of extra practice at basic training. As she stepped off the transport bus with her duffel bag and newly earned confidence, she looked around at the specialized training ranges and precision equipment that would be her home for the next 26 weeks. Her assignment to the Military Police Advanced Individual Training Program had been both expected and perfect for her goals. Military police training included extensive firearms instruction, and the top graduates would have opportunities to pursue specialized marksmanship roles. For Sarah, it was the ideal pathway to the advanced shooting training she craved. The barracks at Fort Gordon were different from basic training, less crowded, more focused on technical learning rather than the broad military indoctrination she had just completed. Sarah was assigned to a room with Rachel Porter, a serious young woman from Oregon who had scored expert marksman during basic training and seemed destined for military police work. "So you're the one who wants to break shooting records," Rachel said with a slight smile as they unpacked their gear. "I heard about your improvement curve at basic. Pretty impressive for someone who started from zero." Sarah was surprised that word of her progress had reached Fort Gordon ahead of her. "I just worked hard. I figured if I was going to do this, I might as well do it right." "Well, you're going to get plenty of chances to prove yourself here," Rachel replied. "The marksmanship training here is supposedly the best in the military. Some of the instructors are former Olympic competitors." This news sent a thrill of excitement through Sarah. Olympic-level instruction was beyond anything she had imagined when she first decided to enlist. And they had done so far from that uncertain teenage girl, researching military careers in her hometown library. The first few days at Fort Gordon involved placement testing and skill assessment. Sarah found herself grouped with intermediate shooters, no longer a beginner, but not yet advanced. It was exactly where she expected to be, and exactly where she intended not to stay for long. Her primary marksmanship instructor turned out to be Master Sergeant Elena Vasquez, a compact, intense woman who had competed internationally before joining the military. During their first meeting, Vasquez reviewed Sarah's scores from basic training with a critical eye. "You show consistent improvement and good fundamentals," Vasquez said without looking up from the paperwork. "But your scores suggest you're still learning to manage the mental aspects of precision shooting. Tell me about your goals here." Sarah had prepared for this question. "I want to master advanced marksmanship techniques. I want to compete at the highest levels possible and push the boundaries of what I can achieve." Vasquez finally looked up, studying Sarah's face carefully. "That's ambitious for someone who picked up a rifle for the first time 6 months ago. What makes you think you have the ability to compete at elite levels?" It was a fair question, and Sarah knew her answer would determine how seriously Vasquez took her as a student. "Because every time someone has told me what my limits should be, I've exceeded them. I know I'm starting behind people who've been shooting their whole lives, but I also know I improve faster than most people expect." Vasquez nodded slowly. "We'll see. Report to Range 12 at 0600 tomorrow. We're going to find out exactly where your current limits are, and then we're going to push past them." The next morning marked the beginning of the most intensive training Sarah had ever experienced. Working with Vasquez and a small group of other motivated trainees, she was introduced to precision techniques that made her basic training seem elementary by comparison. They started with position shooting, learning to fire accurately from prone, sitting, kneeling, and standing positions. Sarah discovered that her body type gave her advantages in some positions and challenges in others. Her relatively small stature made her stable in prone shooting, but she had to work harder to achieve consistency in standing positions. "Shooting is about creating a stable platform for the weapon," Vasquez explained during one of their morning sessions. "Your body becomes part of the weapon system. Every muscle, every breath, every heartbeat affects where that bullet goes. Sarah absorbed this philosophy completely. She began to think of herself not just as someone who fired a rifle, but as an integrated part of a precision instrument. During her off-duty hours, she practiced the positions until they became second nature, working on muscle memory and consistency. The technical aspects of marksmanship at Fort Gordon went far beyond anything she had imagined. She learned about ballistics calculations, wind reading, and environmental factors that affected bullet flight. She studied ammunition characteristics and learned how different loads performed under various conditions. More importantly, she began to understand the mental game at a deeper level. Vasquez introduced her to concepts like target focus versus sight focus, the importance of follow-through, and the psychological aspects of performance under pressure. The hardest shot you'll ever take, Vasquez told her one afternoon after a particularly challenging training session, is the one where you know everyone is watching and expecting you to succeed. Learning to shoot well in practice is just the beginning. Learning to shoot well when it matters is what separates good shooters from great ones. Sarah filed this lesson away, not knowing how prophetic it would prove to be. By the 8th week of training, her scores had improved dramatically. She was now consistently outperforming shooters who had arrived with years of experience. Her improvement curve had become a source of fascination for the instructors, who began paying closer attention to her technique and mental approach. The breakthrough came during a long-range precision exercise. The class was firing at targets 600 yards away, a distance that had intimidated Sarah when she first learned about it. But as she settled into her shooting position, something clicked into place. Her breathing was perfectly controlled. Her sight picture was crystal clear. Her trigger pull was smooth and consistent. Most importantly, her mind was completely calm and focused. She fired 10 rounds in slow, deliberate succession. When the targets were scored, she had achieved something remarkable. A perfect score, with all 10 shots grouped within a circle smaller than a silver dollar. Vasquez stared at the target for a long moment before speaking. Martinez, in 15 years of instruction, I've seen maybe a dozen shooters achieve this level of precision at this distance. Most of them had been shooting competitively for years before they enlisted. Sarah felt a surge of pride, but Vasquez wasn't finished. This level of performance suggests you have the potential for elite competition. Are you interested in trying out for the base marksmanship team? Sarah's heart raced. She hadn't even known such teams existed. But the opportunity to compete at higher levels was exactly what she had been hoping for. Yes, Master Sergeant. Absolutely. The tryouts for the Fort Gordon marksmanship team were held 3 weeks later. Sarah found herself competing against soldiers from across the base, including some with years of competitive shooting experience. The format included multiple shooting positions, various distances, and time constraints designed to simulate the pressure of actual competition. Sarah's strategy was the same one that had served her throughout training. Focus completely on her process and let the results take care of themselves. She executed her fundamentals precisely, shot by shot, without worrying about what anyone else was doing. When the scores were tallied, Sarah had not only made the team, but had earned the second highest score overall. Only Staff Sergeant Michael Chang, a veteran competitor with 6 years of team experience, had outshot her. "Welcome to the team, Martinez," Chang said after the results were announced. "I have to admit, I didn't expect someone so new to the sport to shoot that well under pressure." Sarah shook his offered hand gratefully. "Thank you. I hope I can contribute to the team's success." "Oh, I think you will," Chang replied with a knowing smile. "In fact, I think you're going to surprise a lot of people." Joining the marksmanship team meant additional training time, travel to competitions, and exposure to the highest levels of military shooting sports. Sarah's first competition was the Regional Military Marksmanship Championship, held at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. She had never experienced anything like the atmosphere of a major shooting competition. Hundreds of competitors from bases across the Southeast had gathered for 3 days of intensive competition. The facility buzzed with the controlled energy of athletes preparing for peak performance. Sarah's teammate, Staff Sergeant Lisa Park, served as her unofficial mentor during the competition. Park had been competing for 4 years and understood the mental challenges of performing in high-pressure situations. "The key," Park explained as they prepared for the first day of competition, "is to remember that you've already done everything you need to do. All those hours of practice, All those perfect shots in training, they're still there. Trust your preparation and shoot your own match. The competition format included individual and team events across multiple distances and positions. Sarah's first individual event was the 300-yard prone match, which played to her strengths in long-range precision shooting. As she took her position on the firing line alongside dozens of other competitors, Sarah felt the familiar calm that had become her trademark. The noise of the crowd faded away, the pressure of the competition became irrelevant. There was only her rifle, the target, and the systematic execution of her fundamentals. She fired her first string of 10 shots with mechanical precision. Each shot felt exactly like the thousands she had fired in practice. When the targets were scored and posted, she had achieved a nearly perfect score, placing her in second position overall after the first stage. "Outstanding shooting, Martinez," Vasquez said when Sarah returned from the firing line. "You just outshot competitors who have been doing this for years." The rest of the competition continued in the same vein. Sarah consistently placed in the top 3 in individual events, helping her team to a strong overall showing. But it was her performance in the final event, a challenging 600-yard match with wind conditions, that truly announced her arrival as a serious competitor. The wind that final afternoon was tricky and variable, switching directions unpredictably and challenging even experienced shooters. Sarah had spent extra time during training learning to read wind conditions, and her systematic approach to environmental factors served her well. As she prepared for her final string of shots, Sarah felt completely confident in her abilities. She had trained for exactly these conditions. She understood how wind affected bullet flight. Most importantly, she trusted her ability to make the necessary adjustments. Her final 10 shots were fired with complete focus and precise execution. When the targets were scored, the range officer announced her score over the public address system. Firing position 23, Private Martinez, a perfect score of 100 points with 8 X-ring hits. The announcement drew applause from competitors and spectators alike. Sarah had just achieved something remarkable, a perfect score in challenging conditions, against experienced competition, in only her first major tournament. As she walked off the firing line, Chang approached her with a broad grin. "That was exceptional shooting," he said. "I've been doing this for 6 years, and I've never seen a first-time competitor perform at that level." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the congratulations and attention, but also deeply satisfied. She had proven to herself and others that her improvement at Fort Gordon wasn't a fluke. She truly had the ability to compete at elite levels. That evening, as the team celebrated their strong overall performance, Vasquez pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation. "You know, Martinez, what you accomplished today was genuinely extraordinary. Perfect scores don't happen by accident, especially not in those wind conditions." Sarah nodded, still processing the day's events. "I want to ask you something," Vasquez continued. "Have you ever thought about trying to make the All-Army marksmanship team?" Sarah's pulse quickened. The All-Army team represented the absolute pinnacle of military marksmanship, competing against the best shooters from all branches of the military and even some civilian champions. "I didn't think I was anywhere near that level yet," Sarah replied honestly. "Based on today's performance, you're closer than you think," Vasquez said. "The tryouts are in 6 months. With focused training, I believe you could make a serious run at earning a spot." As Sarah lay in her bunk that night, replaying the day's events, she realized that her journey was just beginning. She had gone from complete beginner to regional competitor in less than a year. The possibility of competing at the national level seemed almost surreal, but after today's performance, it also seemed achievable. She thought about all the people who had doubted whether a woman could excel in military marksmanship. She thought about her own doubts during those first difficult days at basic training. Most of all, she thought about how far systematic effort and unwavering determination could take someone willing to put in the work. Tomorrow, she would return to Fort Gordon and begin preparing for the biggest challenge of her young military career. The All-Army tryouts would test everything she had learned and push her abilities to their absolute limits. But tonight she felt ready for whatever came next. She had found her calling, developed her skills, and proven her ability to perform under pressure. The girl who had once wondered if she could become a marksman was now setting her sights on becoming one of the best in the military. The records she had dreamed of breaking suddenly seemed within reach. The 6 months following Sarah Martinez's breakthrough performance at regionals passed in a blur of intensive training, technical refinement, and mental preparation. Master Sergeant Vasquez had designed a training program specifically tailored to prepare Sarah for the all-Army marksmanship trials, and it was unlike anything she had experienced before. Making the all-Army team isn't just about shooting well, Vasquez explained during one of their early planning sessions. You'll be competing against the best shooters the Army has produced over the past decade. Some of these people have been shooting competitively since before you were born. Sarah understood the magnitude of the challenge, but rather than feeling intimidated, she felt energized. Every major step in her military career had involved proving herself against more experienced competitors, and each time she had risen to meet the challenge. The training regimen Vasquez developed was comprehensive and demanding. Morning sessions focused on technical skill development, perfecting her shooting positions, refining her trigger control, and working on advanced breathing techniques. Afternoons were devoted to mental training, including visualization exercises and pressure simulation. The physical aspects of shooting are just the foundation, Vasquez explained. At the elite level, everyone can shoot well technically. What separates champions from competitors is mental strength and the ability to perform consistently under extreme pressure. Sarah embraced this philosophy completely. She spent hours in meditation-like practice, visualizing perfect shots and mentally rehearsing her competition routine. She studied the psychological aspects of peak performance, learning techniques used by Olympic athletes to maintain focus and confidence in high-pressure situations. The physical training was equally demanding. Sarah worked with a strength and conditioning specialist to optimize her body for precision shooting. She learned that marksmanship at the elite level required specific types of muscular endurance and stability that needed to be developed systematically. Your body is your shooting platform, explained Sergeant First Class David Liu, her conditioning coach. Every muscle group needs to work in perfect harmony to create the stability necessary for consistent accuracy. Sarah's training schedule became almost monastic in its intensity. She woke at 5 a.m. for physical training, spent 3 hours on technical shooting practice, dedicated 2 hours to mental training and visualization, and ended each day with equipment maintenance and performance analysis. The improvement in her shooting was measurable and consistent. Her group sizes shrank week by week. Her scores and practice matches steadily increased. Most importantly, her confidence grew as she repeatedly demonstrated the ability to perform well under simulated pressure. 3 months into her preparation, Sarah faced her first real test, the National Guard Championship, which would include several members of the current all-Army team. Vasquez had entered her in the competition specifically to expose her to the level of shooting she would face at the trials. The competition was held at Camp Perry, Ohio, the historic home of American competitive shooting. As Sarah walked onto the legendary ranges where generations of marksmen had competed, she felt the weight of history and tradition. This is where the greatest shooters in American history have proven themselves, Vasquez said as they surveyed the facilities. Winning here has been the dream of competitive shooters for over a century. Sarah's first glimpse of the competition level was sobering. Watching other competitors during practice sessions, she observed shooting that was consistently excellent in ways she was still working to achieve. These weren't just good shooters, they were artists with their weapons, achieving precision that seemed almost superhuman. But rather than feeling overwhelmed, Sarah found herself studying their techniques and mental approaches. She noticed how they prepared for each shot, how they managed their breathing and timing, how they maintained focus throughout long strings of fire. "They're good," she admitted to Vasquez after watching the practice sessions, "but they're not doing anything magical. They're just executing fundamentals at an extremely high level." "Exactly," Vasquez replied with satisfaction. "And that's exactly what you've been training to do." Sarah's performance at Camp Perry validated months of preparation. She didn't win. That honor went to a veteran competitor with 15 years of experience, but she placed 4th overall, ahead of several members of the current all-Army team. More importantly, she learned that she could compete effectively at the elite level without being overwhelmed by the pressure or the quality of the competition. Her shooting under match conditions was nearly identical to her performance in practice, which Vasquez identified as the mark of a true competitor. Consistency under pressure is the rarest skill in competitive shooting, Vasquez explained after the competition. Technical ability can be taught to almost anyone willing to work hard enough. Mental toughness under pressure is much more rare, and you clearly have it. The final 3 months of preparation before the All-Army trials focused on peak performance refinement. Sarah's technical skills were now at an elite level. Her challenge was learning to execute them flawlessly when everything was on the line. Vasquez designed increasingly challenging scenarios to test Sarah's mental resilience. She practiced shooting while artificially stressed, after physical exertion and under time pressure that simulated the worst-case scenarios she might face during trials. The trials will test everything you've learned, Vasquez warned. Technical skill, mental toughness, physical conditioning, equipment management, and your ability to perform consistently across multiple days of competition. Sarah also spent time studying the competitors she would face. The All-Army trials drew the best marksmen from across the service, including current and former team members, Olympic hopefuls, and legendary figures in military shooting sports. Don't worry about what anyone else is doing, Vasquez advised. You've earned the right to be there through your own performance. Trust your preparation and shoot your own match. The trials themselves were held at Fort Benning, where Sarah had first learned to shoot during basic training. Returning to the place where her marksmanship journey had begun felt like completing a circle, though she was now an entirely different shooter than the uncertain beginner who had struggled to hit targets at 50 yards. The format for the trials was comprehensive and demanding. 5 days of competition across multiple disciplines, distances, and conditions. Only the top 8 finishers would earn spots on the All-Army team, and the competition for those positions would be fierce. Sarah arrived at Fort Benning a week early for final preparation and equipment verification. The precision required at this level meant that every detail of her equipment had to be perfect. Rifle maintenance, ammunition consistency, and shooting accessories all had to be optimized for peak performance. During the preparation week, she had her first opportunity to observe the other competitors up close. The talent level was immediately obvious. These were shooters who had dedicated years to perfecting their craft, and their casual practice sessions displayed precision that would have been championship-level performance at lower levels of competition. Among the competitors was Staff Sergeant Jennifer Adams, the defending individual champion and arguably the best female marksman in military history. Adams had won virtually every major military shooting competition over the past 5 years and held several records that many considered unbreakable. Don't be intimidated by reputations, Vasquez reminded Sarah as they watched Adams shoot during a practice session. She's human. She has good days and bad days like everyone else, and you've proven you can shoot at her level. Sarah nodded, but privately she was awed by Adams' performance. Every shot seemed effortless, perfectly executed, with a consistency that bordered on mechanical. Beating shooters of this caliber would require Sarah to produce the best shooting of her life. The opening ceremony for the trials featured speeches from military leadership about the importance of marksmanship excellence and the tradition of military shooting sports. Sarah listened with growing excitement as she realized she was about to compete in an event that represented the pinnacle of military marksmanship. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced the trials director, "you represent the finest marksmen our Army has produced. Over the next 5 days, you will compete for the honor of representing your service at the highest levels of national and international competition." The first day of competition featured individual precision events at known distances. Sarah's opening event was the 300-yard prone match, which had become one of her strongest disciplines during training. As she took her position on the firing line, Sarah felt the familiar calm that had become her trademark. The months of preparation had created an almost automatic process. Her body knew exactly what to do, and her mind was clear and focused. Her first string of shots felt perfect. Each trigger pull was smooth and controlled. Each sight picture was precise. Each follow-through was consistent. When the targets were scored, she had fired a nearly perfect string, placing her in third position after the opening event. "Excellent start," Vasquez said as Sarah returned from the firing line. "You're shooting exactly the way you did in practice. Trust your preparation and keep doing what you've been doing." The competition continued across multiple events and conditions. Sarah's performance remained consistently excellent, not necessarily winning every event, but placing in the top 5 consistently enough to maintain her position among the leaders. By the third day, it became clear that the competition for team positions would come down to the final events. Sarah was currently in 7th position overall, within the qualifying margin, but with no room for error in the remaining competition. The pressure was unlike anything she had experienced before. Every shot now had enormous consequences. A single mistake could eliminate months of preparation and end her dream of making the all-Army team. During the 4th day's competition, Sarah faced her greatest test yet. The afternoon event was a challenging 600-yard match in variable wind conditions, exactly the type of shooting where experience typically trumped talent. As she prepared for the match, Sarah felt the weight of the moment. This was potentially the deciding event for her chances to make the team. Everything she had worked for during the past year would be determined by her performance over the next hour. She settled into her shooting position and began her pre-shot routine. Control breathing. Check sight alignment, read the wind conditions. Focus completely on the process. Her first shot felt perfect and resulted in a bullseye. Her second shot also found the center of the target. As she continued through the string, Sarah entered a state of complete focus where nothing existed except her rifle, the target, and the systematic execution of perfect shots. When she fired her final round, Sarah knew without looking at the target that she had shot exceptionally well. The entire string had felt effortless and precise, in a way that only happens when all aspects of shooting technique come together perfectly. The scoring confirmed her intuition. She had just fired a perfect score in challenging conditions, moving her up to 4th place overall with 1 day of competition remaining. That evening, as she cleaned her rifle and prepared for the final day, Sarah reflected on how far she had come. 18 months earlier, she had been a teenager in Texas who had never fired a gun. Now she was within striking distance of making the most elite marksmanship team in the military. "Tomorrow will determine everything," Vasquez said as they reviewed the scoring. "You're in position to make the team, but you'll need to maintain your current level of performance." Sarah nodded, feeling calm and confident despite the pressure. She had already proven she could compete at this level. Tomorrow would simply be another opportunity to demonstrate the skills she had worked so hard to develop. As she fell asleep, Sarah visualized the perfect execution of tomorrow's events. In her mind, every shot found its mark. Every technique was flawless. Every mental approach was focused and confident. The girl who had once wondered if she could become a marksman was now 1 day away from joining the most elite shooting team in the military. The records she had dreamed of breaking were suddenly within reach. Tomorrow would determine whether her remarkable journey would continue to its ultimate destination. The final day of the all-Army marksmanship trials dawned clear and still, with perfect shooting conditions that would eliminate weather as a factor in the day's competition. Sarah Martinez woke before her alarm, her mind already focused on the challenge ahead. Today would determine whether 18 months of extraordinary effort would culminate in earning a spot on the most elite marksmanship team in the military. As she went through her morning routine, Sarah felt a calm confidence that had become her trademark. The nervous energy that had characterized her earlier competitions had been replaced by a deep trust in her preparation and abilities. She knew she belonged at this level, and today she would prove it to everyone else. The final day's competition consisted of 3 events: a precision rifle match at 800 yards, a challenging multi-position rapid-fire event, and a culminating match that would test every skill developed over months of training. The cumulative scores would determine the 8 team members, and Sarah was currently in 4th position with no margin for error. Master Sergeant Vasquez met her for breakfast, reviewing the day's strategy one final time. "You've already proven you can compete at this level," she reminded Sarah. "Today is just about executing what you've practiced thousands of times." Sarah nodded, her focus already turning inward to the mental preparation that had become second nature. She visualized each event, mentally rehearsing the perfect execution of every technique she would need. The first event of the day was the 800-yard precision match, the longest distance of the entire competition, and traditionally one of the most challenging. At this distance, even tiny errors in technique or judgment could result in missed targets. The margin for error was essentially non-existent. As Sarah took her position on the firing line alongside the other top competitors, She felt the familiar sense of calm focus that had carried her through every major competition. The noise of the crowd faded away. The pressure of the situation became irrelevant, and her world narrowed to the rifle in her hands and the distant target that appeared almost impossibly small through her scope. Her pre-shot routine had become automatic through thousands of repetitions. Check the wind flags, control her breathing. Achieve perfect sight alignment. Apply smooth, consistent trigger pressure. Follow through completely. Her first shot felt perfect and was rewarded with a bullseye that drew appreciative murmurs from spectators. Her second shot was equally precise. As she continued through the string, Sarah entered the zone of complete focus that elite athletes describe as their peak performance state. Each shot was fired with mechanical precision and unwavering confidence. The distance that had once seemed impossibly challenging now felt manageable through months of dedicated practice. Her breathing was perfectly controlled, her sight picture was crystal clear, and her trigger control was flawless. When she fired her final round in the string, Sarah knew without looking at the target that she had shot exceptionally well. The entire sequence had felt effortless in the way that only happens when years of preparation come together in perfect execution. The scoring confirmed her intuition. She had just achieved another perfect score under the most challenging conditions of the entire competition. More importantly, her performance had moved her into second place overall, putting her in excellent position to make the team, regardless of how the remaining events played out. Outstanding shooting, Vasquez said quietly as Sarah returned from the firing line. That was championship-level performance under maximum pressure. Staff Sergeant Adams, the defending champion who was shooting nearby, approached Sarah with a smile of genuine respect. "That was some of the finest shooting I've ever seen," she said. "You've earned everyone's respect with that performance." The second event of the day was the multi-position rapid-fire match, which tested shooters' ability to transition quickly between different shooting positions while maintaining accuracy under time pressure. This type of shooting favored experienced competitors who had developed the muscle memory necessary for smooth, rapid transitions. Sarah had spent countless hours during training working specifically on position transitions, knowing that this would be one of her greatest challenges against more experienced shooters. Her systematic approach to skill development had served her well. Her transitions were now smooth and automatic, allowing her to focus completely on accuracy rather than mechanics. The event required shooters to engage targets from prone, sitting, kneeling, and standing positions in rapid succession, with limited time for each string of shots. It was a comprehensive test of shooting skills under pressure that eliminated any possibility of lucky performance. As the starting signal sounded, Sarah dropped smoothly into her prone position and began engaging the first series of targets. Her shots were fired with the same precision she had demonstrated all week, but now with the added challenge of rapid position changes and time constraints. Her transitions between positions were fluid and efficient, the result of hundreds of hours of practice that had made the movements automatic. In the sitting position, she maintained the same level of accuracy that had characterized her prone shooting. Her kneeling position shots were equally precise, demonstrating the technical mastery she had developed across all shooting positions. The standing position, traditionally the most challenging for precision shooting, had been one of Sarah's focus areas during training. As she rose to the final position, she felt completely confident in her ability to maintain accuracy despite the increased difficulty. Her final string of shots was fired with the same mechanical precision that had characterized her entire performance. When the time limit expired, Sarah had successfully engaged all targets with scores that would have been impressive in a deliberate, precision match, much less under rapid-fire conditions. The scoring placed her performance among the best of the day, solidifying her position in second place overall and virtually guaranteeing her selection for the All-Army team. With one event remaining, she had already achieved her primary goal of earning a spot on the team. But Sarah's ambitions extended beyond simply making the team. Her consistent excellence throughout the competition had put her in position to potentially win the overall individual championship, an achievement that would announce her arrival as one of the premier marksmen in military history. The final event was a culminating match that combined elements of precision shooting, time pressure, and challenging conditions. It was designed to test every skill that had been developed throughout the week of competition and to determine the overall champion of the trials. As Sarah prepared for the final event, she reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought her to this moment. 20 months earlier, she had been a high school student in Texas who had never fired a rifle. Now she was competing for the individual championship of the most elite marksmanship competition in the military. The transformation had been extraordinary, but looking back, it also felt inevitable. Each challenge she had faced had been met with systematic effort and unwavering determination. Each level of competition had been conquered through dedicated preparation and mental toughness. The final match would be fired at 600 yards in conditions that had been challenging throughout the week. Variable winds and changing light would test every aspect of shooting skill and mental preparation. It was the perfect culmination for a competition that had pushed all participants to their absolute limits. Sarah took her position for the final time, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction regardless of the outcome. She had already exceeded her own expectations and proven her ability to compete at the highest levels of military marksmanship. Whatever happened in the next hour, she had already achieved something extraordinary. But as she settled into her shooting position, Sarah felt the familiar drive for excellence that had characterized her entire military career. She hadn't come this far to settle for simply making the team. She had come to win. Her pre-shot routine was executed with the same precision that had carried her through every major competition. Her breathing was perfectly controlled, her sight picture was crystal clear, and her mental focus was absolute. The first shot of the final match felt different somehow, more significant than the thousands of shots she had fired in practice and competition. This shot would begin the sequence that would determine the individual champion of the all-Army trials. The shot was perfect, resulting in a bullseye that set the tone for what would follow. Her second shot was equally precise. As she continued through the string, Sarah felt herself entering a state of performance that transcended even her previous best efforts. Each shot was fired with mechanical precision and complete confidence. The challenging wind conditions that were affecting other competitors seemed manageable through months of dedicated practice in similar conditions. Her sight picture remained consistent, her trigger control was flawless, and her mental focus never wavered. As she progressed through the final string, Sarah began to realize that she was potentially shooting the match of her life. Every shot felt perfect, in a way that only happens when all aspects of shooting technique come together in perfect harmony. The gallery of spectators, including many legendary figures in military marksmanship, began to take notice of her performance. Word spread that something special was happening on the firing line, and attention focused on the young soldier who was shooting with precision that approached the limits of human capability. When Sarah fired her final shot of the competition, she knew immediately that she had achieved something extraordinary. The entire string had felt effortless and precise, in a way that defied the challenging conditions and pressure of the moment. The scoring process seemed to take forever, but when the results were finally announced, they confirmed what Sarah had felt during the match. She had just fired a perfect score under some of the most challenging conditions of the entire competition. More importantly, her cumulative performance across all events had earned her the overall individual championship of the All-Army Marksmanship Trials. In 20 months, she had gone from complete beginner to the top marksman in the Army. The announcement of her victory drew sustained applause from competitors and spectators alike. Even veteran marksmen who had dominated the sport for years recognized that they had witnessed something special, a performance that would be remembered as one of the finest in the history of military marksmanship competition. As Sarah walked off the firing line as the individual champion, she was approached by Colonel Patricia Williams, the director of Army marksmanship programs. "Private Martinez," the colonel said with obvious admiration, "what you've accomplished here is genuinely historic. In 30 years of involvement in military marksmanship, I've never seen a shooter develop so quickly or perform so consistently at the elite level." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the recognition and attention, but also deeply satisfied. She had set out to prove that systematic effort and unwavering determination could overcome any obstacle, and she had succeeded beyond her wildest expectations. But perhaps more importantly, she had shattered assumptions about what was possible for women in military marksmanship. Her victory had been achieved not through any special accommodation or separate competition, but by outperforming the best marksmen the Army could produce in direct competition. That evening, at the awards ceremony, Sarah received not only the individual championship trophy, but also recognition for setting a new accuracy record in the final event. Her perfect score under challenging conditions had exceeded the previous record by a margin that marksmanship experts described as remarkable. As she stood on the podium, holding the championship trophy, and looking out at an audience that included some of the most respected figures in military shooting sports, Sarah thought about all the people who had doubted whether a woman could excel at the highest levels of marksmanship. She thought about the drill sergeant who had warned her that military life would be too demanding for someone of her background. She thought about the classmates who had questioned her decision to pursue military service instead of college. Most of all, she thought about her own doubts during those first difficult weeks of basic training. All of those doubts had been answered definitively, not through arguments or explanations, but through performance that spoke for itself. Sarah had proven that excellence in marksmanship was determined by dedication, systematic training, and mental toughness rather than gender or background. Her victory represented more than just personal achievement. It was a breakthrough that would inspire other women to pursue excellence in fields where they had previously been underrepresented. She had not only broken accuracy records, but had also broken barriers that had limited opportunities for others. As she left the ceremony that night, Sarah was approached by a young female soldier who had been observing the competition. "Ma'am," the soldier said nervously, "I just wanted to thank you. Watching your performance this week has inspired me to try out for my base marksmanship team. I never thought someone like me could compete at this level." Sarah smiled, remembering her own feelings of uncertainty when she had first considered military service. "If you're willing to put in the work," she replied, "you can achieve anything you set your mind to. I'm proof of that." As she walked back to her quarters carrying the championship trophy and wearing the new team jacket that marked her as one of the 8 best marksmen in the Army, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. She had set out to learn marksmanship and had discovered capabilities within herself that she hadn't known existed. She had faced every challenge with systematic preparation and unwavering determination, and she had succeeded beyond her original goals. But more importantly, she had proven that the phrase "they said women can't shoot" was nothing more than an outdated assumption waiting to be shattered by someone willing to do the work necessary to prove it wrong. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. There would be national competitions, international matches, and the chance to represent her country at the highest levels of shooting sports. There would be more records to break and more barriers to overcome. Tonight, however, Sarah Martinez was content to savor the satisfaction of a goal achieved through extraordinary effort. The girl who had once worried about whether she could become a marksman had just become the best marksman in the Army. The records she had dreamed of breaking were now her own, and the barriers that had once seemed insurmountable had been shattered through the simple but powerful combination of systematic effort and unwavering belief in her own potential. Her story would inspire countless others to pursue their own seemingly impossible dreams, proving once again that human potential knows no limits for those willing to pursue excellence with complete dedication.